Okay, we've begun recording July 21st. It's 3 o'clock, LCEA bargaining. Welcome everybody. It's been an eventful couple of days. Lots going on, lots of discussion at the board meeting yesterday. Many of you probably tuned in or at least got the highlights in some form or fashion. I'll share my screen. Just with light agenda. Let me stretch everything back out here so I can see everybody. We've been busy around the district office today as we pivot on a few things and try and figure out how we're going to make some things work. Stuart, I did get a few minutes ago when you sent over the
a revised draft, yeah.
Revised draft. Hang on one second. Really quickly, I'm sorry I forgot. We need to do a roll call so Gail can document attendance for the meeting. So we'll go first. Chad Farnsworth.
Jamie Sidoric.
Linda Shepherd Miller.
Dorinda McKinney.
Jeffrey Williams.
Michelle Hoppenstad.
Dave Myers.
And did we get Jake? All right, and Jake Stein, he's on. I think that's all of us.
All right, Stuart Clyde, LCEA.
Kathy Smith.
Emmy Gordon, LCEA.
Charlene Campbell.
Lynn Schlatter.
Kirsten Olafson.
Okay.
Do you get Tony Beckett? Because she got talked over, so.
There we go. I see her. Tony Beckett. We got her.
All right.
So I feel like we can just a couple of things that came up that warrant a decent amount of discussion, and then definitely finish with looking through progress on the MOU and what all that's going to need to entail. That we've had some additional. As we discussed last bargaining session, the possibility of pushing back our start date, looking at an additional week there, that got expanded a little bit. So what I'm doing is, we usually set our calendar by having a calendar committee meeting, and we go through, and in that meeting, LCEA and SEIU are represented. So we're working on some drafts with those new start dates that the board put forward yesterday, and trying to figure out how we're going to work out all of the instructional seat time, all of the pay days for employees. So we do not have a draft ready at this time, but there's people. We've been working on it all morning and trying to put it in different people's hands, and I've put different people's eyeballs on it. So what I would like to do is tomorrow reach out and try and set up a calendar committee meeting so we can present those calendars. Not necessarily the meeting tomorrow, but just so people can put eyes on it and we can have some talks.
Is it really a calendar committee, or calendar just needs to be approved in bargaining and in contract ratification? Doesn't necessarily have to go through the whole committee, does it?
It doesn't necessarily have to, and I will be fine just setting up for us to take a look at it through bargaining. Because it pretty much at this point community input and some of the things we do through committee, it's going to be very restricted anyway. Trying to squeeze a lot of factors into the calendar. So let me finish trying to work on some drafts that take care of some things, and so we can present to this group's fine, and we'll look at it in our next session whenever we set that up, or we can just set aside a meeting specifically to look at that calendar because it needs to be done as soon as possible.
Now, I've heard, now I haven't gotten verification, that the governor has waived the 180-day requirement.
I have not heard that he has waived the 180-day requirement. Where did y'all, is it just scuttlebutt floating around, or did you feel like it was coming from credible places I can tap into?
I've just heard that through scuttlebutt, and I thought, so I wasn't sure.
Okay, because you've got not only when you get into secondary, you've got the seat time that becomes a challenge, especially when we move into those block schedules. And then you're looking at, that's what we're wrestling with. Once you put the paid holidays in and cover all the seat time, how do we squeeze it all in? So,
And another thing is, you're looking at those schedules. If I recall, in contract, we have 135 hours of plan time a year.
Yeah, we should be more than fine on the plan time. So
Okay.
I think that's something that we won't be as difficult to overcome. It's really going to be, trying to get all of it put together to get the student seat time along with into that 196 day with the holidays built into it. So we'll continue to grind on that. I spent majority of my portion of my day today working on that, and then now we put it into some other hands and some other eyeballs to make sure, we don't want any conflicts with FTE windows, with who knows what assessment calendar will lay against it with, who knows what that's going to mean now. But also payroll and things of that nature. So we're working it through, and we should be able to get back together really soon on that. And if we're okay, exchange some drafts before we have a final heavy discussion on it. Are you okay with that?
Well, and let's maybe just do a vote. Is it acceptable for Chad and I to do sidebars to work on the details of some of this? And I would say that was an okay activity and acceptable. I don't know how everyone else would vote on that.
Or we could do something like a small committee like we've done before. It doesn't necessarily mean to be, 10 each, but you could have 2 or 3 on. Might be easier for some people if we had more eyes on things, but either way it would be fine.
Kathy, I like the idea of that. I like both of what you guys are saying. If we could subcommittee it and then just do a handful of people, because my team is being stretched to the max right now on trying to get things put together at a drop of a hat, and we're pivoting, it seems like, every few minutes. So that will be great. The next thing I have on agenda is
So do we have any
Okay,
consensus on that? Other folks? Yay,
I'm good.
nay?
I'm good with it. I would just ask that from our side, Stuart and Kathy are both included.
Thank you.
Yep, I think that sounds great.
any objection from my folks?
No, all
Objection.
trust for you, Chad and Stuart.
Go for it, Chad.
I trust you 110%. You guys
Yeah.
got it.
All right, Sid's in charge.
Thanks, Ed.
All right, so next bullet here is our newly introduced option 4. We were not aware there was going to be an option 4. So this is what was put into play at yesterday's workshop, and I figured you guys might want a little explanation on that, and kind of the rest of the world has been working on that at the district office and looking at what those ramifications are. So I'm not exactly sure we have all details worked out. But essentially what that would involve is within the allocations that are dedicated at each school site, to the best of the school's ability, we will provide an option to parents for their kids to be at home and receive live streamed classes. And basically that would involve them going through the course of their school day, sitting in front of a computer and receiving their lessons live streamed. Now, that wouldn't
wasn't
be,
my understanding. I thought it would go more like what we had before with the distance learning, because Steve Johnson even talked about live streaming could be a problem. So I thought it was more of the distance learning, not a teacher having a class and live streaming at the same time.
they would not. They would have, you would have dedicated,
Okay.
that you would have basically a teacher teaching in an empty classroom and live streaming that way. And I think those were some of the concerns with the other kids in the classroom. So you would say in secondary, you would carve out sections that were warranted, that teachers would teach a live stream session from their classroom. And then at an elementary level, you would have a teacher that would essentially teach a class roster from an empty classroom. So that, it does pose some challenges. I don't know exactly the class sizes look like. They will be somewhere around 35 for elementary and 40 for middle and high. But until we see demand, we just don't have answers for it right now. So what is happening is rapidly new intent survey is being sent to parents to scrap the data we had before, and now that they will have 4 options for them to select their option, and not just, what do you think you'd want to do, actually tell us what their intent is, of how to move forward with their child's education.
And that might be a good option, because I've talked about many times, what do we do with our teachers who have at-risk situations at home, have at-risk health issues of themselves, where a full brick and mortar is not in their best interest, but something like this could be. So we may need to look on some criteria to be able to identify which teachers could do that.
Well, can I just chime in? And I will probably be the unliked comment here. I don't see option 4 as being a good pick for us as a county. And I'll tell you a couple of reasons why. I think you're going to be pitting teachers against teachers. Who's to say my situation isn't more drastic than the next person's? And anybody can get a doctor's note, for one thing. For another thing is, like I said last time, I have lived the virtual teaching and the in-person teaching this summer. And I'll tell you, I had an AM session for 3 hours and a PM session for 3 hours. It is brutal. It is difficult. Why we are considering this option when we have Lake County virtual with set curriculum and the set ability and already everything in place, guys, just to keep the kids on for 3 hours for one subject, it's tough. It's really tough. And I really have bad visions of one person getting this option, why didn't other people? Why wasn't it available to me or me or me? And who has the final say over the teachers? If 3 people put in that they need this from their doctor's note, who gets the ultimate if there's only enough for one teacher? And to think about having those class sizes that Chad just said, oh my goodness, I literally only had 8 total. But it is so difficult when you're working with the challenge of live streaming, when you have all of the family in the background cussing, or you have them screaming, or you have them talking, or they're eating their dinner. Oh, no, wait, mom wants you to stop and actually get off the computer to go eat your lunch. So sorry, I'm going to interfere with your time. There's so much going on in this scenario that I'm not sure, and I think you guys did a really phenomenal job yesterday. And let me just tell you that I watched the majority of it after hours, but I just think we had that virtual piece already in place. And I don't think parents are going to get what they think they're going to get. And I don't know that teachers really know what they're getting into if they pick that option. That might be my unpopular opinion.
Well, I think everybody has got thoughts around it. You know, I feel like we had designed some options that were workable, and where, you know, there's a lot of districts around us that are claiming that they're going to be able to pull this off when possible. Some of that soft language we've all grown to love, and I think they're going to run into the when possible issue and back off of a lot of it. But you know, we're charged with following, you know, the direction of what our board has recommended. So, but I will tell you, as far as staffing, Stuart, and what you guys are saying, you know, I don't know if it pits teachers against one another, but I will speak from a district HR standpoint. It opens us up to a huge liability issue of discrimination. Because anytime you get into hiring processes, you know, you guys well know, you know, the original factors of discrimination that we consider in any hiring process don't disappear just because COVID's here. And then when you get into another layer of, you know, medical discrimination or reverse discrimination, I think we run into some real issues there. So I would tell you probably the, you know, the qualifications and the skill set and the principal having, you know, the hiring authority at the school is probably going to be where it lands. I can't see, you know, I can't see it really going otherwise. But I do think that there will be situations, just because it works out, that, you know, principal sees, wow, I've got, you know, somebody that could really do a good job with this. Because I do agree with Kirsten that it is going to be extremely difficult. And what I worry about is a teacher committing to it and then realizing what they've gotten themselves into. I don't believe it's going to be a pretty tall task to be able to deliver instruction on a daily basis and meet all that seat time, and face all the challenges like you just described.
Chad,
Yes.
can I just ask a question to interrupt? Because
Absolutely.
this is my understanding of this option 4. My understanding of the option 4 would be for those students that did not want brick and mortar, that they can stay at home and have a teacher assigned from their school. However, those students are expected to follow the same schedule as they would if they were in school. So if they have a first period class and Miss Beckett was their first period teacher, and Miss Beckett was actually teaching nothing but virtual, my other understanding is that teachers would not be from home, that they would actually come on campus
Not necessarily.
during that time, and they would have all their materials and resources that they need to conduct this class. But it has to be from if for us, 7:20 starts today, that is when their first period starts. They would follow their same schedule as if they were home. So it's nothing that is going to happen after that teacher's regular work schedule that they're expected to do. Is the understanding for this option 4?
That is correct. So they would follow, because we have to clock all the normal seat time, and and keep in mind all the assurances that have to be met also, to allow for collaboration with the kids and support of their ESE needs and ELL needs, and all those assurances that were listed in the mandate. And they are gonna have to follow that regular seat time.
And the modified schedule is whether or not they take 2 classes at school and 2 classes on late virtual. That is the only option that they will have for the modified. The modified would not be that they choose a regular teacher at a school site. So, and it's up to the individual school to determine what 2 periods, whether or not it's in the morning or in the afternoon. And if they choose that route, they still have to provide transportation home. If it only works out for Lake Mineola, for those kids that are on modified schedule, that we can only do first and second period, then that's the only time that we can do first and second. It can't be a second and a third, or it can't be a third and a fourth. We have to do what works best for our schedule.
That is correct. Because there are so many, it is so limited on the master schedules that and anybody who does select that modified, any other classes that they did not do modified with you, they would do with straight Lake virtual. It would not be a mix with the option 4.
So essentially, Mr. Farnsworth, we're looking at a 7.5 day of live streaming, plus or minus lunch and planning.
That is correct.
No,
Yeah.
7.5 hour days, including lunch and planning.
Correct.
Yeah. Plus or minus, you're planning lunch.
So it's going to be a tall order, and I think it sounds really great, and especially if you start comparing, to neighboring districts. I mean, you're talking about Orange, who has hundreds of people that manage. There are over 100 people that manage their, online learning and things of that nature, and we have 6.
But don't we have an IT department with over 50?
Yeah, but when you
Okay,
get into the instructional side of the house, I mean, you like the IT people that take care of us getting paid too, though, right?
So basically, for that teacher with health issues, that coming back face to face could be a detriment to their life and health, or because they have autoimmune children, husbands, whatever, we are taking away all of their options?
Well, I think their options will be to apply for wherever there's allocations available and wherever there's spots available. As far as designated someone based on their health status to put into a position, I can't see us being able to do that.
That's why I talk about developing some kind of a rubric or criteria. But I mean, someone who's got 25, 30 years or a year or 2 away from retirement, they've been an honest, great employee for all that time, been with us through the highs and the lows, then to say, sorry, goodbye, we don't need you anymore, we don't want you. That doesn't seem right.
Well, I don't think that's the message that we're sending. I think it's...
So what are their options then?
Well, they can apply for what's available that fits their, fits what they can handle from a health standpoint. I just described to me a sustainable system to provide the education to kids and meet this essential function. If everybody runs out and gets a doctor's note that has compromised immune system, I mean, you can't get it done. I mean, trust me, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I feel for anybody that's got some type of compromising health situation. But, at the end of the day, we've still got to provide this essential service to children.
Wow.
I know. I mean,
that's why I thought the 4th option might be an answer to those folks, so they could do some virtual. We could utilize our expertise as the crisis averted and those folks came back into brick and mortar, they would then transfer over. It seemed like a wonderful solution, but apparently not.
Well, I need you, can you just describe what you, how you saw it as a solution? And I just need you to explain it to me better.
Well, we went 2 months with distance learning, and although it had some peaks and valleys, some problems, it still was workable. And it concerns me that Kirsten talked about, because the MOU would have still been in effect, so she would have seriously should have only been 3 hours available for her distance learning. But I mean, if folks got to come into the building, great, but they're not doing face-to-face and risking infection.
So I think what Stuart heard possibly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stuart, I think he heard yesterday or was under the impression that this option 4 would allow teachers the ability to work from home and avoid that contact, which it's a true concern. But that, I see, that's not how I sort of heard it yesterday. So that's why I brought up that I do see some possible issues. And I'm not saying that we aren't concerned about people's health from any which way we look at it. But it's a different thing. And Stuart, you know, I was outside those my contract hours. This was something for summer school specifically. This was not during the distance learning time. So I knew what I was getting into, but it's a tall order to keep kids engaged for 3 hours when we don't have those built-in systems or curriculum. I had to learn everything on my own for Google Classroom, for all these different types of programs that I could use to enhance. And I don't see that our teachers have that yet. It's going to take them a lot of time to get up to speed, whereas Lake County Virtual already has these processes and curriculum pieces already in place.
I'll just speak on the high school level kind of. I think why that becomes very difficult is because you're getting so right now, if we were just use the data we got from the first survey, 50% of our kids were coming back brick and mortar, which could change, but you're going to have individual sections. So you may still need that teacher to teach 2 of the in-person sections and then only have the one in virtual because of certifications and everything that come in, because all the kids, it's not like a cohort. So I can say at the high school, it would be much more difficult to do that because I don't think you're going to have those perfect classes to fit into that.
And I think they were talking about the fact that making it easier on the students, they were trying to see what they could do instead of just having a full-time like virtual and then coming back and being different from the brick and mortar. Not for sure if this really would work as that. When I brought it up in the first task meeting, I was talking about that a teacher could do it virtually and still plan with her or his, with their team, and it would work real well with elementary and middle school. Not for sure how that would work with the high school, but they could work collaborative and they could still be doing the same thing, so they wouldn't have to do the like virtual.
And it would be difficult at a high school. I'm just looking at myself. When I did the numbers for Lake Mineola,
Correct.
I only had 693 kids that committed to come back on campus out of 1,800. Okay, I had a lot modified and several virtual, but give or take, I still had 400 folks that did not reply one way or another. So if I have someone with reading, for an example, I only have 3 reading teachers, okay? And one has 9th, the other has 10th, 11th, and 12th. But if I don't have enough students for that teacher to teach that class on live to students, and they have 4 periods. And out of those 4 periods for reading, only had 30 kids that said, okay, that kid really needs the reading. What am I going to do with that teacher for the other 3 periods? Now I've got other kids that I've got to come and try to fill those seats, because those other kids are actually either modified or brick and mortar. Yeah, I'm getting all tongue tied here. But I'm just saying, I don't have that. It makes it difficult for a high school to say that I can just have that teacher stay home and teach when I may not have enough students for her to teach virtually, and I need that person back on my campus to teach the other 2 classes.
Unless they do all 3 classes, 1 9th grade, 1 10th grade, and 1 11th grade, rather than separating out your reading teachers by grade.
I will tell you, Mr. Klatt, I actually asked my teachers that same very question. Which one would they prefer? Would you prefer to teach all subjects? And this is coming from a middle school perspective. If I had a team that taught virtual, like a core team, then that would say that I'd have one teacher teach 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade ELA. The majority of the teachers in the room, and there was about 8 of them, said no, they did not want to do that. They actually prefer to teach 1 period of virtual and the rest brick and mortar.
Correct.
And that's what the teachers wanted in the room that I was in today. So I'm just giving you some background on when I asked. This was a team of my department chairs and the leaders on my campus.
And it comes also to prep. So now you've got 9th grade class. Now you have 4 preps.
That's a lot of work when you start to add up all those classes and preps, and that's a lot of work on the teachers.
And I think a lot of this isn't going to flush out until we see what the numbers look like also. But I just want to be clear on that. Option 4 didn't come from a place of benefiting the employees. It came from a place of giving parents who were looking for an additional option.
Chad, when you were saying about enrollment of 35 per class, is that a minimum of 35 or maximum?
I can tell you it depend on it. It's a soft mark. I think it could be a lot less if people were not interested at a school, and it could be a lot more if we would try to hold to those numbers as close as we can as a maximum. But when you look at it, I think it's a matter of they're going to have to gauge the interest, because Dr. Weiskopf, right before I came in, she said, this is kind of the numbers we're trying to stay by. But she knows they could fluctuate up a tad, but she would not want to fluctuate much more than that. But then they could get really low if there's not a whole lot of interest. And then, what happens then? Because when you start talking about, okay, well, maybe 2 schools could share one virtual scenario, and then I'm like, you're getting really close to, you might as well be doing like virtual, So it's because it's not their home school anymore. So, it's going to really hinge on what those numbers look like on how we staff it.
So what happens to the teachers we have hired for the district if only half of our students come back?
The goal is to hold on to everybody we can. I think that's been the one thing we're holding tight to, is we need these class sizes right now our drivers from the district perspective was, we want it as, get the class sizes down, try to get the social distance the best we can, and work things in a way that we can pull off brick and mortar along with some other options. But what I'm worried about also is whenever you take those same amount of allocations and start doing virtual sections with them, that's naturally, it seems there's a possibility that could drive class sizes, those few we were being able to spare, it might push those back up. I'm not sure, Julie or Linda or Jake or anybody, that you guys have been knee deep in it. What do you see option 4 doing to class sizes?
Chad, right now my head is swimming because as soon as that message went out to parents, that phone would not stop ringing. And I'm just telling you, I'm trying to put my head around this whole, because this option 4, it threw all of us for a loop. All right.
Linda, what excuse me, was the option not, did I not hear somebody bring up a number of 40?
I heard 35 in elementary, and I thought 40.
Because I heard 40 for high school.
Middle and high school was
Crazy.
40.
Yes,
But
middle
I
and high
think-
school. Yeah, 40.
Yeah. And see, I could see a lot of teachers running from that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have brick and mortar, and I may have one section of this. Why am I going to take 40 kids and do all the grading and everything with it?
And then what happens when when the pandemic passes, or
Mhm.
and they all come back to school? You can.
Right.
To answer your question, Chad, it would, if we have to pull a teacher from a section that we already have planned, it would put the kids that came to school into the other classes and increase those classes. So defeating the purpose of what we were trying to do.
Correct.
So I think that's a big concern. And I know both you and Dr. Weiskopf really have stated, we're trying to keep all of our teachers because we do believe they're all going to come back, and we want to be prepared for when they come back. So, we're trying to work the best that we can to keep them all. But it would drive class sizes up. That's what we're trying to avoid.
Okay, and so circling back, Charlene, your question, we're not looking to reduce allocations. Sorry, I'm laughing at Tony's cat.
Yeah, we weren't looking to be in this situation either, but it found us.
So, I think as we see those come back, we gotta stay in touch and keep talking about, okay, what exactly that looks like. And we've got people working on it. We'll see as the results roll in. I think the consensus was to give it a week to look at what the data brought in for people to make selections. But also, thinking through, okay, what does this look like as far as, working conditions and what will be the demands on the teachers. Any other questions on option 4?
I've been in touch with a lot of teachers who say they can't come back if it's going to be face-to-face because of their own situations, their own health, life, family's health and life. And I appreciate him saying that we want to keep all of our teachers, but we're not providing a conducive work experience, work environment where we can keep all of our teachers. Just a comment.
Gotcha. So we'll keep everybody updated on how things develop around that option. Next bullet you see is launching classrooms. We briefly touched on that the first bargaining session we had via Zoom a few sessions back. It was reintroduced yesterday in the board meeting, and I committed to bringing that idea back to the bargaining table. So here we are. I'll tell you now, as far as supply and demand on how that can be pulled off of food service, I still have a lot of questions on that. But the premise altogether, I think it presents some challenges, but I think I want to put it out there for anybody to discuss. And I'd like to get you guys' thoughts on it.
I have a very simple thought. That's a hard no.
Okay.
The only way it might be a possibility is if you were going to pay the teachers their hourly wage for that time. But generally, that's in the contract. It's always been, we've worked hard to get that in the contract, and other folks may have other opinions, but I've got to say that's going to be a hard no for me.
Hard no here. I
Yeah.
agree with you, Stuart.
I agree.
Agree. Because it might be hard to come
Agree.
back and not have it again.
And if I remember the discussion from the board, it was Christy saying that teachers would love to volunteer to have lunch with their students. And no,
What I've cautioned with in just conversations that I've had with folks is the challenges. There's a lot of different challenges as far as delivery of food. You know, can food service pull off the grab and go? If we look at our block schedules with beginning of the day, planning at middle school and end of the day planning at high school, that pretty much makes that uninterrupted lunchtime the only break in the day. So that's not on one end or the other. So that was a challenge we were looking at, and how do we overcome that? I can say probably on behalf of the board that if it was strongly considered that it would be a 1-year thing. There would be no intention for it to come out of contract and then you guys have to fight to put it back in. So I feel comfortable in saying that.
well, plus there's the sanitation issues, the cleaning issues. We work to get breakfast out of the classrooms because of the sanitation and cleaning issues. And there were still folks who were told they had to have breakfast in their classrooms. And
Yes, there was still had breakfast.
And with that lunch, are they gonna have the kids put in their lunch number? How's that gonna work with grab and go? And if we do the classroom with it, how's that gonna work?
Yeah, I think that presents other challenges on, okay, how do we, yes, with direct cert and the current school lunch program, everybody gets a free lunch. However, there's documentation required behind that, so you can be reimbursed for meals served. And there's also some guidelines on students making choices and things of that nature. So, some of that food service stuff, I'm not exactly sure how they would overcome some of those obstacles, but I know there would have documentation could present an issue.
And lunch in the classrooms, they're only looking at that for elementary?
no.
I was told that we need to introduce the discussion, and that will be for every level. I don't see how you would pull off 1,000 lunches or 3,000 lunches at a secondary level. So, and that's, I don't feel like it's necessarily, what sounds simple, logistically could become very difficult. I think we can overcome any obstacles, but we just
I know most high schools have gone to an additional lunch so that they can keep those numbers down in the cafeteria and on the outside. I know for me, we've gone from 2 to 3 lunches in order to be able to accommodate inside and outside.
Well, because I did ask some of the principals, how, as far as cohorting kids in the cafeteria right now, how does that look? And they feel like they can cohort the kids, face them in different directions, but then social distance them from other cohorts. So I think that's what the approach they were looking at. And when you combine that with expanding the number of lunch periods, as Linda mentioned, they were able to reduce those numbers in the cafeterias.
I just don't see how you're going to be able to do some of that stuff and keep everything clean and have all these classrooms with all this inside the classrooms. It's bad enough trying to keep the cafeteria clean from bugs and everything with the food, let alone every classroom.
I think it's just absurd to even expect somebody to basically have 5 hours with like no bathroom time or anything, because it's not like you can go necessarily in between classes when there's one staff bathroom and the students are using the students' bathroom, and you're supposed to be greeting, that it's just impossible. I mean, that's just absurd.
I mean, restroom time, personal necessity time for teachers, even under the best of times is challenging. The schedules that we're looking at with the block schedules, there's going to be even more issues. And that's always been an issue with teachers' contracts since 1923. Literally.
Okay. Well, any other statements, questions on lunch in classrooms?
I mean, I understand that that was a CDC recommendation, but I don't think that was well thought out from their perspective, and they weren't really thinking of today's schools when they made that recommendation. So overall, no lunch in classrooms.
Can I ask one question, just a clarifying question? Because I know I don't want to, as the teacher, have my class for lunch. If a admin wanted to bring my class and supervise them, they may use my classroom. I'm not saying that they couldn't if that helped reduce the cafeteria. But for monitoring, the teacher, would not be responsible for the monitoring of their lunch, wherever that
Right.
lunch might take place.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't, and there's not enough personnel in order to, I think, provide that kind of coverage and make a significant impact. I think the adjustments that they're working to make school by school, depending on their facilities and class sizes and things of that nature, or enrollment rather, I think they're making some adjustments to get those numbers down as much as they can. Okay, the next thing I had was to go back and revisit our MOU. Stuart, did you have anything that you want to discuss outside of that? I kind of had bullets thrown in just as new things that presented themselves yesterday. I didn't know if you had anything though.
Not at this time.
Okay. And some of that will probably be folded into.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find. I'll pull up the MOU, and I made a few notes where you guys had added some things too. Let me see if I can find it here. We looked at when they were health and safety.
We'll
Where
go back to the very first
okay.
paragraph.
I didn't see any changes in there. Go ahead.
I did. The sentence, both parties acknowledge the obligation to meet the requirements of the emergency order, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to strike that whole sentence.
Okay.
Especially since we just filed an injunction about that.
I kind of figure there might be some, that word obligation, acknowledging an obligation might not.
Exactly.
I fully understood. So like I said last time, that just kind of a drafty introduction. We'll shape that up a little bit.
Actually, there have been 2 injunctions filed, one in Miami-Dade and one in Orlando.
I saw that.
So anyway.
Yep.
Onward and upward.
So the health and safety, I read through what you guys had commented on. So I was like, okay, well, there was a list of them with a question mark. Probably you guys posing is a good idea to list them or not. When you start going through and trying to pull apart, it's including everything. I get that statement is very broad and general, so we might need to hone the statement. So it accurately reflects the expectation that, people will not commit FERPA and HIPAA violations. But as far as summarizing them and breaking them out and doing research on it, I think that's going to be a little bit difficult and probably a lot more than what we want to list in the MOU.
Can we say something about in all related regulations and standards?
And I'm just going to put some notes in.
I'm just throwing that out as a way of not having to list them, but I mean, you could get into IDEA, you can get into all kinds of things. So you just, in all related standards and regulations.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I debate over whether it was even necessary because we're required to do that anyway. You know
That's
what I mean?
true, but it's always a good reminder.
I feel like it's really, I swear I've been trying to beat it into people's heads around every corner because it's not those intentional mistakes, it's those unintentional ones that come back to haunt you. So, I'll think of a way to shape that up where it might not necessarily list them, but it definitely, it sounds and fits a little better, okay?
Tad, is there any way that those FERPA and HIPAA requirements could at least be accessed on our website so that a teacher could easily find them?
Absolutely. And
if that's so, they could have either a link or they could just say see page so-and-so or whatever.
Yeah.
When we reach the final version of this, we can hit live links out of this probably when they come to it, and we can provide some external links on some of our COVID resource pages also. So
and HIPAA is HIPAA.
So are you guys okay with me going to wherever you guys have made comments as we move through this?
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. Kirsten, Kathy, anybody else?
And this,
well, I do have one thing that maybe before we get in at the end of that health and safety, you talk about face shields. Oh, wait, okay. All right. No, go back. Kirsten wrote about, never mind.
It's down
I'll
there.
cover that
okay.
later.
Okay.
Because you described it, face shields only for those who, because of their job, but some people may want face shields for claustrophobic breathing, whatever other reasons. So, and then I think there's a note here about face coverings. You say they're going to be provided. Do we want to say that 5 of them will be available or given?
Yeah, that's what,
On the
as
screen.
on the screen, on the bullet.
Right.
Yeah, I put each employee will be provided 5 cloth face coverings to begin the school year. Additional face coverings will be provided upon request.
Okay.
So that way it just establishes that you guys are getting them right out of the gate. And I think this is one of them. So that's it appears I do believe this is what they come in a pack, and they're pretty well constructed. I was pretty impressed when I got them, so I was kind of worried about, what they would look like, and I think they look pretty good. So
Just a side question. Do they have a pocket so a filter can be added to them?
I do
Some
not.
of them,
I do not see a pocket on them, but I will tell you that there's multiple plies in it to where you could probably adjust that if you wanted to add a filter in there somehow. But there's not open pocket that I can see.
Okay.
So we'll be providing 5 of those to get everybody started, and then we're gonna keep them coming if we need them. The plastic face shield is the next bullet, and I'll tell you it's purely out of availability on why we feel like we need to kind of tier that out on who gets those immediately, and then how we can provide them later on. So if we can get face shields in, obviously they're more expensive than the cloth face mask, but we want to make sure that some of our front in your face folks, because it moves beyond obviously instructional when you've got food service and you've got bus drivers and some other folks. So we want to provide them upon request for anybody who, like you said, describes some claustrophobia or things of that nature. But that's something we're not going to be able to just endlessly provide to everyone at this time. So I don't want to put it out there like we can meet that demand, because we cannot at this time.
And just to give you, face shields are reusable, I'm assuming?
Yes. They
Take out the will.
Oh, hang on.
Thank you, Kathy.
Oh yeah.
Right? Okay.
So we'll continue to do the best we can and get those to try not to limit it. And once we get available stock, we can notify folks also. The district will provide hand sanitizer for every classroom or learning environment. You guys commented as frequently as requested by instructional staff, or minimum of 2 bottles per month. I think that's going to be one of those things we learn and grow with. What I would like for it to be is that they are stocked. If you report I'm out of hand sanitizer, then we're going to provide you with hand sanitizer. So, so I don't know I just want to make sure that you guys have what you need as far as that goes.
Your update is good.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. This one, you guys, the classrooms, learning environments to be supplies necessary resources, sanitize hard surface periodically. So basically this goes back to you guys' concerns from last time, if I remember correctly, that you want to make sure that if kids got their hands on these things, they're allowed to use them, but if for some reason spraying in other kids' eyes, or who knows what the variety of things they could get into with that we're not going to hold any recourse for teachers, and I'm okay with that.
Good.
And I'm assuming that, yes, if somebody just abuses it, it's one thing. But I mean, if like the one thing you were saying, like if a child really does something wrong, they will be punished, I'm assuming, disciplined somehow,
Oh
correct?
yeah,
Okay.
definitely. I remember my first year as a dean, I had a kid that talked another kid into drinking hand sanitizer.
Huh.
That was interesting.
I had a
Yeah.
student put it in my coffee.
Oh, yeah, that's not good. Well, 9 to 5 action. We putting stuff in people's coffee.
Mhm.
If supplies are not available and members of the bargaining unit purchase such supplies with their own money, they will be fully reimbursed when the receipts are submitted if authorization was granted by an administrator prior to the purchase. I'm okay with that. I hope you guys do not run into that situation. But as long as an administrator has said that's okay, then I'm okay with that. Administrators, do you guys feel any different on that? I'll take that as a no. So.
Silence is consent.
There you go. This one's a little bit different because I definitely understand the need for explaining more how what the process and procedure is going to be as it occurs. So, but I'm going to need help in that, what that looks like in reality. And
I
and I
can,
feel like it could be different for each school. So if you guys want to elaborate on this a little bit, and administrators, you can take some time to read it and then follow
well,
up.
this was mine. I put this suggestion in, and only because I've been working in-person summer school where we've had these situations come up, and I know I have to protect the privacy of the student, but in our school, we've already talked that we don't want to move the kids any further. We don't want to send them up to the front office. Okay, they've talked to 3 of their friends along the way, or they've now talked to the custodial staff. They've talked to the front office clerks before they even get to the nurse's office. So we're trying to just keep them sort of set aside, whether that's right outside the door or in a pod, if you have access to a pod, somewhere until someone else that's trained could come check the symptoms and make that determination on moving the student, what's happening with the student. And I just think that this does need a little bit more so that the school can make those decisions on what's best for them while protecting student privacy and not getting everybody else exposed.
I think I would like to, probably the best thing to do is for me to touch base with student services and our lead nurses for the district and get their perspective on what they think would be the best protocol for it. Because, I mean, definitely, I get it. I can picture my 8-year-old, it looked like a Family Circle cartoon. She's probably
That's what I
all
was.
over. She's probably all over that campus before she actually makes it to the clinic. So I think, let me get kind of what, if we can land on what seems to be a good best practice, and I can include that back and get you guys feedback on it. Because I think it's going to look different at the elementary level, and then the middle and high school. The middle schoolers can disappear pretty easy too, though. So.
Yeah, I just think it's going to look really different. And I think we got to give the schools a little bit of flexibility, because what we do might be totally different for our 1,000+ students versus a 500, elementary size school.
And I think the privacy considerations can be pretty well managed, because kids go to the clinic every day and there's not a whole lot of secrets about it. I think it's a matter of not getting into specifics or discussing the issues with folks that could get you in the hot water. So we'll
I'm
work
more worried
on that.
about the family circus where they're traveling all over the world before they got there.
I agree. Then the instructional personnel will not be required to perform temperature checks on students. And you guys recommended be given a thermometer upon request to take student temperatures. That I think we get into that supply issue again, and it's putting the onus back on the teachers to perform perform those checks. Perhaps maybe that's where I want to check with nurses again, to where if you guys feel like a temperature check might be necessary, perhaps someone could come and you could call for a temp check. I don't know, that was just kind of my initial thought. Because I think it's going to be very difficult to get 3,000 infrared thermometers, and for that to be the best use of, but as a teacher, if that was what we were going with, then I'd want one, so I just don't think, again, we can meet that demand. So let me talk with the nurses and we'll see. On the COVID-related leave, I put on here that we could include a phone number for employee relations.
Chad?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I had something on the health and safety.
Okay.
As I've read over this, and maybe it's on here somewhere, but I don't see it. I think it should be stated that the district will provide some sort of health and safety training for our teachers.
Let me, I think I had,
it's at the bottom.
yeah, it's in, it might be in the other implications, or when it starts
Section
talking
3.
about training. Yeah.
It talks about training.
So yeah, the goal is for that. I don't know what it's going to look like yet, but I know we're trying to nail that down. But definitely, we want to provide some training and sharing of resources and information in that additional time we're building on the front end of the school year.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Anything else in health and safety, guys?
Yeah. You have that the first time Families Coronavirus Relief Act, 2-week leave, actually 80 hours under the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. And then we're saying that teachers have to use their own personal sick time. I have a problem with that, if there's another way around it. And I know you told the board that we talked about using the sick bank, and that was not a good use. I'd like to look at what other options, because I mean, if we're asking teachers come in, we're asking them to work with 150, 200 students a day. They're going to be exposed statistically more than once. And so to then turn around and say you have to use your own sick time because you're and I just think that that's an issue if there's another way around it. I know and I just sent you a letter, Chad, that FEA wrote to the chief financial officer to classify teachers as essential workers, which would then allow them to claim workers' comp for exposure. There just seems to be, we should be able to do something more for our teachers than saying, gee, thank you very much. We want you to work with our students. When you get exposed, now you have to take your own time. And that just doesn't seem right.
Can I add something to what Stuart just said? I know you've said this before, Chad, that you can't guarantee where that person possibly got exposed. But let's take, for example, that we're shutting down a classroom, or we're taking those steps and sending those teachers home, and they now have to quarantine. To me, no matter how long they're out at that point, because we directed it, they should absolutely be covered. In 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it takes. Because of us shutting down a classroom or the exposure being in the classroom. Does that make sense?
I mean, I hear what you're saying. I don't know economically how it's feasible to be able to handle it. And I hear exactly what you're saying. I understand where you guys are coming from, but that's if an adult, it's going to be hard to determine the chicken and the egg anyway. But if an adult brings it in, and we've already seen both adults and kids moving around with it. So if an adult brings it in and then we say you have to quarantine, and, I don't think it's going to be hard. Whenever I say it's hard to determine how it was contracted, that's not to place blame on anybody. It's just that it could be endless. Yeah, I agree with Stuart. It could be multiple exposures. It could be endless exposures. And if we're always paying for someone to be out, then I don't see how you sustain that. And I hope, Stuart, as you said, you sent me an email about things FEA is doing, and maybe there'll be some external provisions that come about. But I don't see how we could afford to just continue to cover quarantine after quarantine after quarantine. And I just don't. I agree. There's not a good solution for it, but I don't have a real good answer for it.
Then maybe we shouldn't be in session at that point.
There's another issue.
I mean, what happens if the teacher is out? Let's say that it's with her own family and she's out. She comes back and then gets the phone call from Chris Landry that someone in her class has tested positive. So, I mean, yeah, I understand the cousin barbecue thing of yours and going out and yeah, I understand that may not be able to be explicit on where that originated from. But when you're being notified that someone in your classroom has exposed you, it somehow just doesn't seem that should be a financial liability for our teacher.
I understand. I understand how that's difficult. But at the end of the day, if you don't have the money to pay it, then you can't cover it. I mean, if it's beyond the scope of what we can handle, then it's the same as, those phone calls work in a lot of different directions. If all of a sudden we're calling parents and saying your child needs to be quarantined because you're the teacher, or an adult or an individual, like we have to say, has exposed, an entire class, other kids. And I mean, it's like, okay, that's what I mean by you can't really go to the blame part of it. It's just a economic feasibility of whether or not we can cover it. And I think it's going to be pretty rampant, and I don't see how we would be able to cover it.
And if it's pretty rampant, then again, we're back to, should we be in session?
I think we all have opinions about it, but I don't think anybody in this session has a whole lot of control over that.
Mm-hmm. So could we also put on there, is it possible, and maybe it's just because there's so much going on that I can't decipher all the material at this point, but let's say a class is quarantined and they're sent home. The schools can still work with that teacher, where maybe that teacher goes into Google Classroom format and teaches virtually. So maybe it's just adding some wording that the Lake County will work with teachers on utilizing a virtual platform or other options before some sick time has to be.
I agree, and I want to balance the concern for the teacher also, in that I don't want to put an expectation that you've gone home with COVID and you're really sick, and that we expect you no matter what to get on that computer and make it happen. And then on the other side, we're going to have teachers that are asymptomatic going, why am I sitting home right now? But they'll know the answer, but so I do think some help on some help on trying to figure out what that wording looks like, and I could use some assistance in that. So if you guys want to,
okay,
I'll work on it, and you guys can push something in my direction also. And we can come up with some creative ways to at least say, because I don't want, if you've got the ability to work and all of a sudden that classroom gets quarantined and it looks just like an option 4 situation at that point,
Mhm.
then, man, then we need to do it. So maybe some safeguards to protect them from having to use it if it's not necessary.
Do we know what other districts in the area are doing?
I have not. I've reached out to other superintendents, and as of last week, nobody had established additional beyond the federal leave that 2 weeks, 80 hours. There were some that I believe there was one county that had in contract, it was written in that workman's comp was there. If it was able to be established, just had typical workman's comp stuff. Basically, you're going to head and do a dispute every time with it. But there wasn't anything that I found that anybody was going above and beyond that.
Okay, maybe you can explain this. I'm looking at a thing from First Family Coronavirus Response Act, and it talks about the 80 hours, 2-week equivalent of paid sick. Then it talks about 2/3 of qualifying for reasons number 4 and 6, up to $200 a day for caring for an individual subject to an order described as self-quarantine or experiencing similar health conditions. And then it also talks about 12 weeks of paid sick time for expanded family and medical leave at 2/3 of for qualifying reasons number 5. Have you seen this document?
Yeah, I've looked at. I mean, I don't have it pulled up in front of me or memorized, but yeah, the expanded family medical leave applies for people that if they're daycare or there's a shutdown for their child care, that they can exercise that for a period of time at 2/3 pay. I know Dave's in the room. He can
Because I haven't
probably
heard anybody
speak a little
discuss
more.
this at Lake County before I got this flyer from Wage and Hour that needs to be posted.
We've discussed that in a bargaining section with hang on, I'll pull it up.
We talked about the 2 weeks or 10 days.
It was laid out in that quick reference sheet. Hang on, let me pull it up.
Yeah, Boone said she was going virtual, Florida virtual with her kids, and no, you just washed.
Oh, I want to use the. What did she say, Ann?
She just said, "Well, you too? Are you going to?"
Anthony, can you mute your mic?
Chad must have muted him.
Okay, I'm still looking, guys. Give me just a second. All right, I'm getting the screen shared again. All right, can you guys see that?
Not yet. Thanks.
No, not yet.
No.
Ah. Okay. There we go. This was at our bargaining session a couple sessions back where we had a leave of absence quick reference guide. And it laid out that emergency paid sick leave act with some details. And then the second section is that Emergency Family and Medical Leave Expansion Act.
Now, I saw that posted, but I don't remember that being in a bargaining.
I thought we had presented this at our first virtual session that we came back to. I'll have to double check.
Anybody else
and
remember
see.
that? I personally don't, but
I know this, I know we did at our task force meeting. And I know we definitely had this document and discussed it. But I mean, these are what the options are. And I can go back and I'll definitely send you what you need and reference where we have talked about it. But these are the two options that are established by the federal act, and then there's certain stipulations and requirements within them that Emergency Family Medical and Leave Expansion Act is one you reference for when you've got someone that's under the age of 18 or somebody that's incapable of self-care, then you can file for this. And it extends beyond the 2 weeks. So you could cover your 2 weeks with the first emergency paid sick leave act if you went into that, but then it would go into the 12 weeks or the remaining 10 weeks would follow, and you could be paid at 2/3 the daily rate.
now, okay, this will reimburse 2/3 the daily rate. And could the county then pay the other third?
That's not we don't plan to do that, no.
I'm just saying, is it even possible?
Yes, I mean, it's legal, good.
It is legal, okay.
Mhm.
So, or if the person would, if it would have the 2/3, you could take then only you would have to take possibly 1/3 then of your sick time?
That is correct. Yes.
So okay, thank you, Kathy.
So, you know, honestly, I'm not sure we would have, I'm not sure we're going to have a whole lot of folks that exercise that one, but it'll be interesting to see. I think that'll be the less of the two, obviously. Whereas
We do have teachers with kids, so.
No, absolutely. But
and elderly parents and spouses and all kinds of situations.
Watch it.
So this would, this would be basically, this is where we want folks to contact employee relations, and we'll add that contact information in so we can give them hands-on guidance on what their best options are moving through leave, because it can get, just by nature of FMLA altogether, can get very confusing. So, you know, we'll have people prepared and ready to step by step, you know, do what's best for them.
All right, and I'm assuming this document then is on the website somewhere?
It is, as part, I know it was part of I want to say it's the digital learning plan. I'll go back and reference. I know, you know, we've had multiple discussions around it, and I know it's been available. So we'll point you guys in the right direction on it. Absolutely.
Somewhere on the website, so
Mhm.
someone that they could always go back and look at it?
Yeah, I don't remember seeing that in a bargaining session, but I
No.
do remember seeing something similar to that on a posting on Facebook, which is kind of scary.
But it's definitely been shared. So I don't want to make any statement of where it has or has not been shared yet, but I know it's been shared. So we'll speak back to that, because I know at a task force meeting we discussed it too. So definitely the whole idea was that as a quick reference guide, it will be available to all employees, and then with hot links that they could click on, that would take them directly into the request request for leave and get that ball rolling, and they would have instructions on what to do.
So I'm going back to Kathy's question. So, okay, this pays 2/3. Can we use, and I think she said the other third out of the person's sick time. How would we go about making that happen?
Mr. Myers, do you want to speak to any of this? Because it will be guided through employee relations, and we'd be able to help. That's where we've got to help people navigate through what their best option and best use of their time is. I'm not sure if he's listening. So we'll, so that the answer is through employer. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, just go.
Stuart,
Yeah.
can you repeat the question?
Okay. If this is going to pay 2/3 for under these certain circumstances, and Kathy asked, can the other third come out of their sick leave so they're getting their full salary for that period of time?
Mhm.
And if so, how would we make that work?
Well, we would be working with the best way for all these leaves is to kind of do a one-stop shop with it and go through employee relations. So how that would work is if that's a situation, they would just need to contact our office, coordinate that through Christina, and she can go between payroll and the employee to make sure that at the end of the day, they get that 2/3 that would come under the one leave, and also it's complemented with the additional third so that they get their full complement of pay come payday. So that would be the easiest way to coordinate it, is just come right through us, because all those other leaves, hopefully they never need to use them. But like if somebody had to be out for an extended period of time and had to apply for FMLA because they were going to be out for a little while, that would come through us as well. So, so they just need to contact us, go through Christina, and she will coordinate everything, and we will be tracking it here. So, you know, she'll set up a database, a spreadsheet, if you will, so we know who's doing what. So that way, if there's any kind of discrepancies from payroll, we can get that fixed.
Thank you, David. Now, do we need to write that into the MOU that that's a possibility?
That what's a possibility?
You mean the 1/3?
This could split. So if they had to be out for a second 10-week or take care of a child, that it's not coming directly out of their sick leave for that period, that only part of it would be.
But I think it's established by law that we have to provide that. So I mean, we can, whatever you guys feel like we need to include that's not covered, then sure.
We just got to find a way to let people know that that's possible.
No, absolutely.
All right.
Well, could this be part of that one bullet that we were having some trouble with the writing, and just make sure that, like, you could do, like you said, a hot link or something to this document?
Absolutely.
So that they could see this and they would kind of know where to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd like for this to be hot wherever we can have it, just so we can get people led in the right direction. So we'll put as many places as we can. And
yeah, there's about 3 bullets where this information would be applied. Acting as a legal guardian, severe illness as a result of. So yeah, okay.
So can I ask a question, because I just don't understand some of this? This could kick in, this emergency paid sick leave. They wouldn't have to file for an extended leave of absence at this point, correct?
No, because that covers the 10 days that you're not required to have board approved.
Okay, so then if they're going to be out longer than this 2-week period, then they would then file for like an extended leave. So a principal could not get an employee to cover that position for at least 2 weeks period time if they're exercising this Emergency Paid Leave Act. I'm just trying to understand how everything fits together.
I think for a scenario to run, you've got to have a complete scenario to be able to completely track how it would go. I mean,
okay.
So, I mean, your hope would be we would figure out, let's say the language that you discussed earlier wouldn't work. They can't continue to work remotely from home. Then they would have the 2 weeks of coverage. They would have the 2 weeks of coverage that's established through the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. And then we would have to see, okay, where does it go from there? Is there a situation where they could qualify for some FMLA benefits? Is there a situation where they could use some of their own sick time to cover to float a gap until they can come back? And then, the last resort being that someone would go on that extended personal leave. Dave, feel free to chime in anywhere you want, or Michelle, or anyone.
As far as covering, Kirsten, like you said, covering that teacher for 2 weeks, initially, if they go on the emergency paid sick leave, then you being the principal would be, covering that person as if they were out for anything else. Just a regular absence at that point. If it turns into a more long-term situation, then it would not be unlike any other situation if you have somebody who needs to be out for an extended period of time.
I agree. For the 10 days, it would be a daily sub is what we do now, daily substitute. And then if it goes into an extended period, we would hope that the principal could find a certified teacher to bring in on a temporary assignment.
Now, do we have anywhere in this document that teachers won't have to absorb or take in another class if a teacher is absent? Because I could see that as kind of being causing a lot of potential problems by when you're mixing cohorts.
We can include something.
Yeah, because it's not in there. I know we discussed it, but it's not actually in this document because we knew that that shouldn't be happening with the current situation.
I thought we had also discussed having a predetermined check-in period after a week, 2 weeks, whatever it was, in order to see how this was working. Is that something that needs to be in writing?
I'm not real sure what you're talking about. If you can.
To review the entire MOU and process, say, after 30 days to see if we need to make some adjustments.
Yeah, as we.
Is that what you were talking about, Charlene?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I would say, some type of disclaiming statement above the signatures when we reach that point that says, based on any changes in this, that, or the other in conditions, then, both parties can come back to the table to request changes or to bargain changes. I'll come up, it's a similar phrasing that we use a lot of times on MOUs and things. So no, we'll definitely put something that above the signature lines with that kind of as a closing statement.
Okay. Thank you, Amy, for sending this to me. I'm going to send a copy to Chad.
What is that?
Just some wording.
Okay, great. So we talked about last time some safeguards for folks that would be applying to go on an extended leave. You guys had a question, kind of doctors who question mark. So I went back to the bullets above and put from a licensed healthcare provider and into those bullets. You know, also didn't put it in there because I wasn't sure how to word it, but there being likely need to be some proof of residence also. I don't know if that can be just verified and not necessarily have to, you know, I don't need to be collecting people's light bills, but you know, I feel like if we can verify residence, then as long as we have the documentation from a licensed healthcare provider, then we're fine. You guys had a bullet on there, an educator may donate personal sick time too.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to discuss that because that didn't seem like a bad idea. We've talked about under normal circumstances how that might not help with sick bank or how that could impact other areas, but I definitely think it warrants a good conversation.
Especially in this pandemic emergency situation.
Mm-hmm. You know, currently, you know, we've talked about it before at the table who can donate personal sick time, and it's that list that of direct immediate family members. So where do you see this going? And I'm not sure exactly who contributed that, but I'd like to hear everybody's input.
Okay, I could start. Go ahead, Kathy.
Oh, well, I was just going to say the idea that, you know, we're talking about all this sick leave, and we're talking about, I mean, this could end up being, you know, someone's out 10 days, they come back for a few days. Well, somebody else has now contracted it, and so now I'm out another 10 days. This could get very, very lengthy in reality. And some people may not have the days, some may, but some may not. So if you're someone who is already sickly and you know you used them, but you have a son or you have a spouse or you have, you know, even a friend. I mean, if somebody is willing to donate a day to whatever, then especially in these times, even if we don't want to do it on a regular basis, but during this time, if someone's willing to do that, just like they donate to the sick bank, they should be able to donate to a person if they wish to do that.
I think currently you can handle the spouse and immediate family members if you've exhausted yours. So I think when it gets into friend and colleague, that's where we would need to establish, you know, some guidelines. I can tell you, having been in a district where it was there, but there was no sick bank, we ran into issues where people were soliciting for people to donate leave to them, which made teachers and employees feel really uncomfortable that they were being pressed for leave. So we probably need to have something that said that there's an expectation that won't happen. And another issue I've seen with it also is you get people that coordinating that can become a little bit interesting too. It's people get, you think, oh, this is just a wholesome thing that, you know, people are going to love to donate their sick time or give a few days here and there. And I've seen some pretty rough circumstances come. You know, granted, Bradford County is a small place, but they everybody knows everybody, but it's a lot like Lake also in that regard. And people get really offended, and it gets really personal really quick. So I would just need to if it's something you guys want me to research and come up with some good language for within the letter of the law, then I can definitely work on that.
Especially if we're not going to afford any additional sick time after the 10 days. I mean, teachers are scared. This is a trying time, and we've got family, we've got ourselves to worry about. I'm just trying to look at all the options.
And I think that's definitely worth looking into. So can anybody else think of anything that might be a consideration that we would need to include or think about? Okay, well, I'll look into it and see what we can come up with as a possibility. And I believe this is as far as I made it in reviewing the document. So we can kind of pick up and review together what we have left here. So if everybody wants to take a moment to read what's in front of them. So yeah, I definitely want to see what other people were thinking, because I did read this bullet. Now that I'm looking back at it, because the temporarily out of field thing triggered. Yeah, I think I definitely think if we can secure some employment, then for someone, and I guess defining minimum requirements. I know if you're a certified teacher, you can teach out of field, but I also, if someone's, K-5 certified, they get displaced, I can't put them in a trigonometry position, and I worry about jamming square pegs in the round holes, So I definitely, I get where you guys are, where you're thinking on this. I just need to think through how, we'd have some safeguards in there to make sure we're doing what's best for kids instructionally also. Does anybody have any thoughts on this? Michelle, I know you frequently work in the waters with me on looking at out of field and temporarily out of fields and becoming eligible. Do you have any thoughts?
I was concerned about the minimum requirements as well. And if a teacher has been reported out of field previously in this district and has not met that requirement, they cannot be reported out of field again.
Right, you can only do it once.
Right. So we run into that more than we like to. So that's a little tricky.
And it's kind of one of those things where once a teacher pulls that trigger, sometimes we try to really explain to them what that means. And principals also, when they're trying to help people out and get them into a spot, it does have an impact on their future, and the responsibilities get put on the clock at that point. So I think it's really educating folks, and the minimum requirements, I don't know, we'd have to put some parameters around it just to make sure, but I don't want to lose good people. So I don't know, Michelle, I think you and I can probably work on this a little bit,
yeah,
and be able to bring something back that carries the message of what you guys are trying to accomplish there.
And another concern right now, since we've been talking about COVID a lot, and the testing centers are not open at full capacity right now. So individuals they may be willing to meet those out of field requirements and can't get into a testing center. So that adds to the problem of people trying to meet those requirements.
Well, if we Yeah.
So we can work on it.
Okay. I definitely see where we can come up with some things, and I want to go back and review some of the stuff that was put out from DOE months back also, because it's not coming in my mind right away where some grace has been provided also.
They can continue in the same out of field assignment for this coming up year. They can't be out of field in a different assignment.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll look at that. Any other comments on?
Michelle, is that for a full year or through December?
I believe it's for the full year.
Okay.
But you may be right. It may be December. There is that December deadline.
There is on some things, and that's why I asked.
Yeah.
Didn't-
We
And
need
that-
to check that.
Yeah. And I don't want to, I definitely want to drag us back into that leave discussion until we have more time to work on it. But there's December 31st deadlines on those federal leaves also from the Fed. So I could see them renewing them, but we'll see what happens.
Who knows whether they will or not?
You know,
Unemployment has until Saturday to get renewed too.
you know, and we won't go there, but I've heard some other things from the federal level that they're looking at trying to take away also when it comes to food service and things of that. We'll see. So I think work schedule, that obviously it's an area that I need to keep working out with what that looks like now that option 4 has come about, and what that looks like for our teachers. And then also working on that calendar and a subcommittee in that calendar ASAP. So I see where it says waivers. What do you guys mean by waivers?
Well, I know in DeSantis and Corcoran's comments and statements that they talk brick and mortar, we want blah, 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 5 days a week. But if you come up with something else, we'll accept waivers.
Okay.
So, I mean, we talked distance learning. There's what is the one, Orange County's, what is it called?
Launch Ed or something like
Launch
that.
Ed that they're doing.
Launch.
So there are waivers that are being applied for by different districts that are doing different types of distance learning or hybrid variations of virtual learning. And that's kind of what I thought we were looking at as the 4th option, but I guess I was wrong.
Well, I think that's what we're looking at is somewhat similar to what some districts are doing, somewhat similar to what whatever catchy name each place is applied to theirs. I'm sure we'll have a catchy name soon for our option 4. It just sounds a little cold, doesn't it? So we'll see. But yeah, that will be part. We will have to provide that in application to DOE with that we're going to meet all those assurances, no matter what program we're utilizing. The Google certification, I think if they've already had it, which is great, because I think some people have covered some of those bases. I need to talk with Dwayne about if there's some advanced next step kind of trainings that they could provide, because I think that'll be neat. And if they have completed it, that's been tracked. So we'll be able to, let people know, or they will be able to verify that they've completed certain portions of the Google training.
Can we require it or recommend it?
The Google training?
Yeah.
Our position is that we require it. I think it's just essential in case of closures, and also just provides people more options in case they do wind up and say, like we were talking about earlier, a quarantine situation where they could continue to work. But I'd hate for it to be that they don't have it set up and ready to rock on it and aren't well versed in it, and that be the limiting factor of whether they can continue to work. So that's the whole purpose of us trying to add in that additional pre-planning time before the year starts, or one of the primary purposes.
Right. Well, and that's why because I was thinking that would be part of the certification. And then now I realize that most of them are taking it already.
Mhm.
And so it's like, okay, then what's going to be the training for the other week then? And that's
Well, I think then,
why the question was.
well, I think then it's the time and the ability to be able to start dumping your class into it.
Classes.
Yeah. So
Planning time to
yeah,
actually do that.
yeah, it's beyond just being trained on how to do it. Then you can actually start doing it. I don't know if principals have anything else to weigh in on that. And I'm not sure, I'll get with Dwayne to see how many people have, because we need to check that data and see how many people actually have been trained in it. But I know whenever he would put a session out, even for non-instructional people last year, man, those sessions would fill up quick, and people were jumping on it. And that I think people have, I think we discussed last time, even some of the biggest critics out there that sit in some of these trainings, they're pretty complimentary of the training that Mr. Weeks does in this area.
So is this different than that online training? This is, because there was one we were offered, and I thought it was like a 10-hour online that a lot of us did. So maybe I'm confused. This is a county specific training?
Let me get clarification on that. As far as I
Okay.
know, that this is a training that has been constructed by, Dwayne. So I'll get clarification on that.
Okay, thank you.
I know there's do you know how many modules we're in?
I don't remember. I want to say that I looked at least, I want to say like 6 modules, but it was all online during distance learning. And then we could, if we wanted to, we could sign up to take like the Google certifications. And I know I did the whole online, but I didn't do the certification. So I just want to make sure this is not the same thing as that for those that have already done it.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'll get clarification on that. My understanding is that this is something more robust. So.
And you might want to also get clarification. Can we require this, or can we just highly recommend?
I think
I'm not sure we can require something above and beyond the state license and certification. Just question. I mean, it's good to have. It would be highly recommended. We think teachers should do it, but can we indeed, quote unquote, require it on top of their regular certification and license?
I mean, I think you have people that we do PD every year, and I'll talk with Ms. Cockroft exactly on what type of PD can be required and what can't be. But I do think that there's nothing.
Because I know the legislature specifies what they see as being required PD.
Okay.
So yeah, you might want to check on that. Because I foresee someone will say, no, I don't need to do this.
Okay. Then the next section goes into training on the safety protocols, and yeah, I don't know what would determine it's proper or not, so I struck that out. Oh, it's funny. Yeah, we'll provide training of the established safety protocols, and I'm not sure exactly what that platform looks like or how it'll be delivered. But that will be part of what occurs in that additional pre-planning week also.
And that
so
makes sense.
We'll get some more clarifications on that. This is, I haven't seen read into this part yet. Now we're running on less than 5 minutes left on our time. So I see some things. I set up configuration, all that makes sense. I'll look at the extended student absences and evaluations. I think evaluations are going to be a whole nother conversation. So we need to look at how we're going to manage that. And I don't know if that, again, if that's going to need a team committee meeting, because that does get a little bit larger than just like a calendar meeting. So I'll be speaking with Guido on that. I see he's in the room listening in. So I'll get with him and we can either do a full team or a subcommittee team meeting and then bring it back to bargaining with the necessary parts.
And then perhaps in the last few minutes, what are we gonna, I mean, I noticed, what's our protocol for school closing? I mean, do we have specific protocols on when we're gonna close a classroom, when we're going to close a building, when are we gonna close the school? These are all issues I'm afraid we're gonna sadly have to look at in the next month or so.
We I can tell you a lot of, when you get into just beyond a basic quarantine of a small contained area of, say, a classroom, and you start getting into what you feel like is an outbreak within a school, then it's going to be, we're going to be guided by the health department. So they're going to be the ones that determine whether a full school shutdown needs to happen or something is established as an outbreak. So go ahead, Stuart.
But if I remember listening to the health department at the school board meeting, they were adamant that they can't say one way or the other. They can only make recommendations, that they can't say you have to do this or shouldn't have to do that. So do we need the actual protocol to help guide us? Because they were pretty adamant that they're only there as an advisory.
And I'll get clarification on what those protocols are and where they're going to come from.
Good.
I can tell you as soon as recent as yesterday, I've heard different things come from the health department than what they've originally told us. So nailing them down has been very interesting.
Yeah, Christy did
so
a good
far.
job trying to nail him down yesterday, but
Well,
he was budging. He was like Jello.
Yeah, I've been on with the superintendent. I've been on a few frustrating phone calls with the health department. We really appreciate their partnership with us and how overextended they are. But it is like nailing down Jello. It's you can tell we're definitely and I feel like we're being a good partner, even so far in that, you know, Mr. Myers and Employee Relations and Student Services, we have been a really good partner so far in helping them deal with some of the overextension that they're experiencing. So we'll continue to try and nail them down. And I definitely hear you. We need established protocols. So we'll see what we can get, and we'll have that available to discuss in our next session.
All right, other folks have anything? Wow, quiet.
I think everybody's in shock.
That scares me. As a teacher, when you hear nothing but quiet, you either think I did a really, really good job, or I totally went over everybody's heads and they don't care anymore.
I was told to behave, so you know what the heck.
Well, you're a special case.
Yes, thank you.
We're gonna say you did a really good job, Chad.
Hey, and Stuart, right?
And Stuart, you both did a great job. That's what we're gonna end off on.
Hey, I just appreciate.
Can you fill out the?
Helping out.
Please complete the survey form and submit it.
Hey, I appreciate us all navigating these rapids together. So, and you guys have been
It ain't
a great
easy.
partner. I know. So we'll continue to keep each other informed. I'm not prepared to set a date yet for our next session. Let me get some feedback, work on the calendars, grinding on that tomorrow, and definitely go ahead and set up a time tomorrow for us to sit down and talk calendar in a smaller group. Let me let our academic side of the house work on some things, and let me work on getting some additional protocols from health department and how we're going to manage some of that. And we'll establish a date. I need probably till Thursday though to really see how the week evolves, and so we're not wasting anybody's time. But I'll also I'll shape up the MOU, put in some edits, create some language, and we'll continue to exchange that in between sessions. And I appreciate the work you guys put in on that.
And hopefully we'll have something from the state's chief finance officer on workers' comp and whether teachers are indeed essential workers or not, which would then put them in a different classification for some of the extra essential worker money, as well as worker comp benefits. And that's got to come from the CFO. And so hopefully I'll have something back from them in the next couple days.
Okay. Yeah. Just
But
share
you never know. Jimmy may never hear from him again.
Okay. Well, we'll continue to stay in touch. Anything else before we close out? All right, guys, it's 5:03 and we're ending LCEA bargaining. Thank you so much for everybody. Please stay safe.
Thanks, Chad.